Well, all right, here we are at week 5 of our Bible reading. Now, let me be honest, for many folks, they start the year off great. Hey, I'm going to read through the Bible. But at this point of the reading is when a lot of folks will drop out. You know, it's cold outside. We're in the book of Leviticus, not the most exciting book, a little bit dry, and people kind of say, you know what, I'm going to stop here. But that's not going to be us. And in this video, I want to provide some encouragement as you read Leviticus to stick with it, because what you are reading is going to pay off later. Now, when I was younger, I loved to play sports, particularly basketball. And one of the things about basketball is if you're going to be any good at it on an individual level, but also on a team level, is you have to be in shape. You have to have endurance and stamina. And so as our season would begin in high school, the preseason, we would begin to run and do sprints. And you know, it wasn't the most fun process. You know, we would complain at times, but what we were doing is building up our stamina and our endurance. What we were working on then was going to pay off later. It was going to pay off in the games, particularly in the fourth quarter. And our goal as our team was to work hard, to be in shape, so then we could outlast that other team. And I share that because what we are doing as we read Leviticus is we are working hard. We are putting in this work that is going to pay off later. So let me give you a few examples. As we read, we're going to get to this point in the story with the Israelites where they are to enter the land of Canaan, the promised land. Now, it's not that they just walk into this land and it's vacant and everything is easy. No, the Lord is going to call them to battle the Canaanites, all these different tribes in this land. And we're going to touch on this later. It's a little bit concerning for some folks. There's a lot of violence. Why does God call them to kill and destroy this people? And so we'll touch on that in a future video. But in this video, I do want to touch on this. In Leviticus, we find some of the reasons that God calls his people to do this. He says that this people is very wicked. They do all sorts of wicked sexual sins. They actually sacrifice their children to the gods. And so this is one of the reasons that the Lord calls his people to be kind of this instrument of justice. And so we find this in Leviticus. Also, as we continue the story, we come to this great little story in the book of Ruth. And we see this lady, Ruth, and her mother-in-law, Naomi, and they are in a tough spot. They're poor, they don't have anything, but yet this kinsman redeemer, this man named Boaz, he comes to help them and support them. And this whole setup of this kinsman redeemer is described in Leviticus. As we continue the story on even further, the people of Israel, they create this nation. They establish the kingdom. And it starts off with King Saul, and then King David, and then King Solomon. And things are going pretty well. The people are doing good. They're being, for the most part, obedient to the Lord. But then they begin to drift. And the Lord is very patient with them. He sends prophet after prophet to warn the people that if they don't obey, he's going to send them into exile. And eventually the Lord, he has enough. And he does send them into exile. And these foreign powers come in and they kill many people. And they bring them off to this foreign land. There's a remnant that stays in the land, but also many folks have to go away. Well, the reason for this is, one, the people have been disobedient and sinful, but they've also broken the covenant, which is laid out toward the end of Leviticus. And so the Lord, he talks about these blessings if they're obedient to the covenant, but these curses if they're not. And so that whole thing makes a lot more sense as we understand the curses and all that falls on these people. Now, as we move to the New Testament, we see this over and over again. We see this with Jesus. When he's born, his parents, Joseph and Mary, they take him to the temple and they offer this offering of these birds. And then he's circumcised the 8th day. This is following the law that's prescribed in Leviticus. Also, when it comes to the crucifixion of Jesus at the cross, we see this drama unfold, but it's also pointing back to the Day of Atonement from Leviticus 16, where our sins are removed. What's interesting is Jesus, he is crucified outside the city of Jerusalem. He's outside the city. And when you read in Leviticus 16, this Day of Atonement, this scapegoat is sent out, picturing our sin being removed, but this goat has to go outside the camp. And so there's this drama of this sacrifice that points to the drama of the cross. When we move into the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 10, the apostle Peter, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, it says in Acts 10 that he's hungry, and then he falls into the kind of this trance. He has this vision, and the Lord comes to him and shows him in this vision all these unclean animals. And the Lord tells Peter to kill and eat, to kill and eat. Typical Peter, he pushes back, he argues with the Lord and says, "No, Lord, I've never eaten an unclean animal." So what is that all about? Well, again, it's pointing to the clean and unclean animals that are described in the book of Leviticus. And so what we see is over and over again, what we are doing now as we read Leviticus is going to pay off later. And so you don't have to be an expert in this book, but read it. Try to understand it best you can. And as you go along in this story, as we journey along in the Bible, things will become much clearer for you. So I hope that's an encouragement. But I want to end with this one. In Galatians 4:4, the apostle Paul writes this. He says that, speaking of Jesus, that Jesus was born of woman. He says he was born under the law to redeem those under the law. And so Jesus, when he comes to this earth, he is born. He's a Jewish man who is under the law that's talked about in Exodus and Leviticus. But Jesus, he is sinless. This is amazing. All these laws, he never breaks one of them. And because of that, he can be our sinless offering, right? That lamb without blemish, because he has no sin. But also note this, that when we put our faith in Jesus, not only are our sins removed, but we receive the perfect righteousness of Jesus. Because Jesus was obedient to the law, and his perfect obedience, his righteousness, clothes us. And so when God looks at you, if you have put your faith in Jesus, he no longer sees your sin. It's been removed. But also when he looks at you, he sees you robed with the righteousness of Jesus. Just amazing. Now, as we end this video, I want to conclude with this. We will be moving into the book of Numbers. We get to Numbers chapter 8, and we're going to touch more on this in the next video. But let me end with this. The book of Numbers, the title of Numbers, is not a great one. The PR company that put that together, they failed, all right? Because it is not really, do you want to read something titled Numbers? I don't think so. But there are a lot of great stories in this book. We're going to read why the Israelites have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. That story's there. We find out why Moses doesn't get to enter the promised land. Also, the most famous verse in the whole Bible is John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world. Well, in that chapter in John 3, there's this kind of odd story about these serpents and this bronze serpent that was created so that people didn't face judgment. Well, that is pointing to what happens in Numbers. And so again and again, there are all these kind of interesting stories that you're going to find in this book that will really benefit you. So don't let the title scare you away. We'll see you next time.